Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration. Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders. We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy to achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. Episode 141 of the podcast, and our topic this week is a popular one, self-awareness. Our guest, Mike Smith, has a story on self-awareness. He was going down a path in his career, and he made a major pivot. We will discuss. This is inspiring, right? The podcast is about leadership, life, and inspiration. Of course, this is about life and leadership, but this is inspiring. Mike made a change, and you have to hear how it came about. He's the founder of the Huddle Advisory, a firm that guides leaders and teams to their leadership athlete potential. When leaders and teams think and train like athletes, they deliver better results. This came after 25 plus years in sports and entertainment. Mike was the CFO, NBC Studios from 1996 to 2003. Then he embarked on a career with the National Football League, the league office, where he was SVP of Finance and Administration from 2003 to 14. And he worked his way up and then made that transition from finance to working and improving the lives, the culture, and the careers of the people there. He became SVP Talent Management from 2014 to 18. Then he was Chief Human Resource Officer 2018 and 19 before becoming the Senior Advisor to the COO in 2019 and 20. Then he went and got his doctorate from Vanderbilt. Can you believe this career and this story? Mike will take us behind the scenes to conversations he had with Commissioner Roger Goodell. He will talk about his mentor, who is a very important person in his life, Troy Vincent. And we will discuss the ins and outs of what creates a great culture and how it's all about the people. The conversation begins now with Mike Smith. All right, Mike, tell us about your time in the NFL. That was a lot of years there. You add them up for us. I look at 17, 18 years. Tell us about when you walked away, what was that experience like? How did you connect those dots?
Well, I mean, it was so formative in a thousand ways, as anyone would expect. So I spent 16 plus seasons there, and the first probably 2/3 of it, I was in finance roles, running their finance for the media business, and then ultimately all of the league office businesses. And just to cut to sort of the end of my NFL tenure and how I ended up, transitioning and why is, after 20 plus years in finance roles at NBC before that and Deloitte before that, some combination of midlife crisis and temporary insanity, but also a big healthy dose of self-awareness is that I was always a right brain thinker in a left brain world. That I always got my juice, even in finance roles, from the people leadership, the strategy, culture building, those things, and less about numbers and accounting and those kinds of activities. And then it really just sort of came to me when I was at the NFL that it was interesting. We were in a business planning process, and it was just not particularly inspiring for whatever reason. And my boss said to me, "You know what? We need to do something to really innovate, to create a culture of innovation here at the league office," which, people may, find that surprising that people in the league office would be thinking about that stuff. But we thought about, how do we get better literally all the time? And what ended up coming of that is, even though I was in a finance role at the time, I ended up creating an employee awards program called the Commissioner Awards in the late 2000s at the league. And it ended up becoming really formative for me in terms of pivoting to the HR and then ultimate coaching side of my career, because I ran this employee program where people weren't about numbers. They weren't around just sort of a digit on a headcount sheet. It was really about the human interest stories and all the little things that all the people in the league did in order to make the magic happen that everyone sees. And for me, that became something very powerful that caused me to raise my hand and ultimately go to Roger, the commissioner, and say, you know what, I want to transition out of finance and create a role at the league office that thinks about people and culture and talent in the same way that we think about selling media rights and we think about selling tickets and we think about the game of football. And I'm not sure he fully knew where I was going with this, but he knew there was a need, and he knew that my intention and my motivation was in the right place. And so he said, you know, Mike, I want you to do it, and I don't want you to sort of have any half foot in finance anymore. I want you to jump off the cliff, and if you're going to do it, you're going to really fully commit. And to his credit, he pushed me to do that, and that's how I joined the talent side of the NFL, probably around 2014 or so. And for me, Chris, and I think you know this, and our audience probably suspects it, is that when you're in these functions, especially in a sports organization, you really have to connect it back to the game itself. And one of my great mentors was Troy Vincent, who ran football ops at the league and still does it to this day. And what Troy said to me was so powerful, and it still resonates with me and forms a lot of my coaching philosophy, is that there's no better example around culture and talent development and meritocracy and all these great principles than the game itself, what goes on the field and what goes on in the locker room. And where I anchored on is this concept of coaching, where coaching was so endemic to the sport of football that I thought the league office should be a role model for how we coached our employees and how we all got better every single day. And so I instantaneously went to launching the biggest coaching program the league has ever seen, training all of our people leaders how to be better coaches, hiring the world's best executive coaches for our senior team. And the results and the were just noticeable, you know, right out of the box. And so for me, that became very powerful around when you invest in people and you invest in people managers, you get a ton of leverage out of that. And you see innovation, you see results, you see efficiency, you see lower turnover, you see all the metrics everyone's striving for. And to just fast forward a little bit, Chris, sort of ultimately, after about sort of, you know, 5+ years in talent related roles, and then again, 16+ at the league, I just felt sort of the need for a change. And quite honestly, I think the NFL needed the change. That they, you know, I think there's a healthy renewal that happens when, you know, people leave the organization and new talent either grows within or comes in from the outside. And I think that's healthy and good. And so I think it was best for both of us, for me to go do my own thing and let the next generation of leaders take over some of the things we started. So it was a great run, so many great mentors and friends that paved the way. But this sort of concept of coaching and really focusing on people and culture and talent really stuck with me early on, and then just was able to be crystallized in a meaningful way towards the end of my NFL tenure.
That's a wonderful story in so many different ways. And I love what you said about Roger Goodell, the commissioner, having the awareness, right, of seeing that, hey, you know, Mike is really, he lights up when he talks about talent development. And let's put this, you know, finance behind him. Well, that's insightful. That's what leadership is, right? And as you said, I applaud him for recognizing that. And I applaud you for having the courage to do that. When you were coaching people, and then let's turn the mirror on yourself, how were you behaving back then when you were in finance meetings? And then what would your demeanor, feeling, spirit, for lack of a better term, be like when you were engaging in the people? Talk about your behaviors between the right and the left brain.
Yeah, it all starts with, I think the greatest superpower anyone can have is self-awareness and looking at the mirror and looking inward. And it's sort of easy to say, but hard to do, because so often we're just caught up in the daily grind of things we have to get done or other demands in our time. And I don't think I was really good at that during most of my NFL tenure. I was fortunate to have great bosses at every step of the way. And if there's any piece of advice for people, especially early in their career, if they're listening to this, is especially as you're growing, don't run towards great companies, run towards great bosses, because great bosses are going to be so formative for you in terms of allowing you to learn, grow, make mistakes, and then ultimately figure out what you're ultimately good at. But Chris, what was interesting to me is sort of, I got my doctoral degree during COVID after I left the NFL. And one of the best parts of spending 2,000 to 3,000 hours, of personal development over the course of many years is that you end up having to do a lot of self-reflection and a lot of writing and a lot of unpacking situations. And there were so many different scenes, scenarios, events during my career that through a more sober, distant lens, sort of looking back, also through an academic filter, I just didn't fully appreciate what was going on within myself and also what was going on around me through either with another party or within a broader ecosystem. And I think that that's so powerful. Not everyone's going to go back and get an advanced degree, but everyone can carve out time for self-reflection to really look inward around sort of what they're feeling, what they're good at, how they're spending their time, those types of things. And I think most people are more in control around how to design their life in a slightly more optimal way than they probably give themselves credit for. And I think in some ways it ties in a little bit to the name of your podcast around keep the line moving. It's not about making seismic changes necessarily. It doesn't need to be about moving from finance to HR necessarily. It's how do I make my job 3% better now than what it is today? Just a little bit of progress goes a long way in terms of really filling ourselves with oxygen and getting a little bit of an extra jump to our step, because just making progress on anything is maybe one of the most underrated motivators that exists. And so how do we remove obstacles or do things just slightly differently, or maybe have a different conversation with a boss or a peer or a colleague in order to just make things a little bit better and easier on ourselves?
So speaking of questions, what you're talking about is potentially having difficult conversations, right? And they don't have to, everybody thinks when they hear the two words together, difficult conversations, that it's a confrontation, it's a fight, it's a standoff, right? Not necessarily. It's also advocating, like you're saying, about what you want to do, or maybe slightly changing your job description, or telling a boss that, hey, when you say this is how it makes me feel, how do you advise your clients? I'm really going in the weeds now. How do you advise your clients when they want to say something? They're afraid to say it. They don't like confrontation. I'm asked this all the time. How do you advise folks to have those, let's call it, and my buddy always calls it, I agree with him, honest conversations? They don't have to be difficult if you practice them. Fair?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think a big piece of that comes with preparation. I think preparation in anything builds confidence. And one of the things I learned at Vanderbilt, where I got my doctoral degree, is this framework around reflection, advocacy, and inquiry, which is my go-to. And there's a bunch of them, and there's a bunch of great coaches out there that have other frameworks they use. But I believe in the power of threes, and so anything that has a three-step process is going to naturally pull me in. And the first step is reflection, because again, I think it always starts with us. And so, where's my headspace? Why am I feeling like I'm in this situation? Why am I feeling like I'm having some conflict? Is it just the way I'm perceiving their words versus what they're actually saying? So the first step is always going to start looking inward. The second around advocacy is that when you have the sweaty palm conversation or the honest conversation, the first step is you got to share what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, how you're interpreting events. And a go-to very popular thing is to use I words. So I felt this when this happened. I interpreted this way. So it's not about the other person. I'm not putting any blame on Chris. I'm just saying this is the events that happened. These are the words I heard, and this is how I interpreted it, or how I felt a result of it, or what I observed happening in my environment. And then the last step is so hard for folks is inquiry, which is that we have to approach these conversations with genuine curiosity around what are we missing? that what is causing this to be a crunchy situation. And so, this is the way I interpreted it. What say you? What am I missing? And then if we approach that inquiry part with a real sense of discovery, to be open to the fact that, most conflict is not 100 and 0. Most conflict is got a fairly healthy dose of accountability on both sides. And I think on the other side of that, if people both think the other side's approaching it in a way to actually get to a genuine resolution, more often than not, people get there.
Great advice, Mike. So there are people driving right now. I always say this, the people that listen all the time are going to roll their eyes. That's okay, because I'm making a point. There are people driving, mowing the lawn, they're out at a swimming pool, they're on vacation, whatever the case may be. They're listening to this podcast and they're thinking about, I got to go in Monday morning, or it's, the weekend, or whatever the case. My point is they're feeling towards their job and they're thinking, you know what, this is great. I'm paying the mortgage, I'm paying the bills, but I would like to enhance my existence at a place where I am 10 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week. We are there so often. I don't want to just exist and do a quote unquote job. I want to get more out of it. What are those folks saying to you as prospective clients or current clients? What are their pain points? The profile I've just, showed you or spoke about to our listeners are a lot of people. What do you tell them? What are they telling you?
Well, I think the first place I always start is, let's look at your calendar and how you're spending your time. Because if you show me your calendar, then I'm going to know what your priorities are. I need a game plan. So, I need to put together some very intentional way of how I'm going to move from where I am to where I want to be. And, thinking about sort of the superpower of self-awareness, I also always start there. Are you aware of how you're perceived? Are you truly aware of what your strengths are and some of your blind spots are and how that manifests? And the way to find out, not everyone's going to have the means or resources to hire a coach, is start having coffees and meetings with people and asking them. It could be that, hey, listen, that meeting went sort of okay. Any advice the next time we do that? What do you think? What do you think the approach should be the next time we do it? And I think those kinds of data points, if you start piecing them together and have a regular rotation of people that you are meeting with, I fuel you with the right data in order for you to put together your game plan. And I think, Chris, the only other thing I would sort of add, sort of to the extent that if it's a different type of challenge around the leader, where say they're having a different problem operating organizationally or a problem with their team, we know leadership is just a really, really hard job. And I think the way I think about it is, one of the reasons it's a really hard job, to use a football metaphor, is that, leaders are GMs, head coaches, and athletes all at the same time. And people oftentimes don't think about themselves as needing to be planning ahead like a GM and constantly scouting for talent, needing to be operating, building a team and developing talent like a head coach. And people also typically don't focus on themselves and train like an athlete. Are they getting the sleep, diet, exercise? Are they putting together an intentional game plan like I just mentioned? Are they, practicing reps in ways that are building their skills like an athlete does? And so those are just some of the things that I end up talking about with clients around, again, based on the unique context, how we have at least a couple frameworks that we can at least use as a launching pad, and then start putting together some wins and keep the line moving.
I love it. Mike, let's transition to sports business. Out of our league podcast with your two buddies, you guys talk about sports issues all the time. What are some things, common themes that come up? So now we're talking sports business. For those fans that listen to this podcast, obviously most of them are interested in the business of sports. What comes up a lot?
What a great question. It's also relevant because on the side, I teach a class at Seton Hall on sports economics. So the two have a way of weaving into each other. I think there's some really interesting things around media that typically always come up. And it's around the performance of different properties. The NFL obviously is a juggernaut, and other properties have high growth curves like the WNBA, for example, but also just the shifting of platforms. So February of 2025 is the first month where total linear TV consumption on streaming services almost equals linear TV consumption on cable and broadcast. And so you see all these sports properties shifting meaningful inventory to the Peacocks and Amazons and Apples, and other streaming platforms. And, that has a lot of implications for the trade-off between reach and economics, the trade-off between reaching a mass audience for some properties and just chasing money and chasing maybe a specific demo and other properties. And so I think the things going on with media are so interesting. And I also think when we were at the NFL, we had this dashboard that we created around how do we measure the health of our league. And it always started with the game itself, that, ultimately the game drove fan interest, which drove consumption across all of our distribution channels, which ultimately drove economics. And for the league, they spent a ton of time just analyzing the metrics of the sport. So length of game, big explosive offensive plays, how many officiating penalties were there, how many injuries were there, what types of injuries, those types of things. And I think you're seeing that mindset really permeate everywhere in sports, where obviously baseball last season had massive shifts with the pitch clock and widening the bases. Adam Silver and the NBA are openly talking about how do we deal with so many teams playing the same way with all these three-point shots. And so I just think that's super interesting how all leagues are taking this very metric-focused approach of the game itself, trying to make it as interesting as possible for fans, especially young fans, the next generation, and then ultimately knowing that an interesting game, a compelling game quality is going to drive all the other levels of economic success.
Speaking of Major League Baseball, with this, the umpire, the home plate umpire, with this ability to, was that a strike? Was that not a strike? Listen, I like to think of myself as innovative. I like to think of myself as forward thinking, but come on. And I was talking to somebody recently about this, and I asked them their opinion, and they said, well, the main thing I care about is getting it right. Well, if it were all about getting it right, why don't we just have robotic and avatar and AI generated players? The player strikes out. They're not getting it right. It's human error. It's drama. It's weather. We have to have grace. We have to be able to flow and adjust to adversity. And the umpires are part of that flow and adversity.
This might be one of the few things in life that you and I are going to disagree on, Chris, because I look at it as, what are the fans paying their money for? What are the fans looking to watch? They're looking to watch a competition between two teams or two athletes and see which one is better prepared and competing better on that day that I'm watching. And to have any third party interject itself in a way that skews the fairness of that competition, I think just sits wrong with me, certainly, and I think most fans. So I think people will always look for, how do we optimize that and make that error go to zero if possible. And for example, I don't know if you're a tennis fan, but I don't know anybody that's complaining around the way the line calls now are in tennis, in terms of having the ability to instantaneously tell whether something was in or out. And it's additive to the human element, not necessarily replacement of it. So I applaud all this innovation. And I think that just creates more business opportunities, more fan interests. And this innovation will just beget more innovation in a way that's ultimately going to be great for the sports.
All right. That's fair. I'm open-minded. There's my self-awareness. I will be open-minded.
But talk to me after the robo ump does something to my Phillies in the World Series and ruins my chances. Then I'm going to come back to your side very quickly.
Exactly. All right. Are you ready for all-star moments? Their first thought, best thought. Okay. Are you ready?
Okay. I am ready.
We will get to all-star moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. Here we go. Number 1, what is the number 1 leadership challenge today?
How do you carve out time to do long-term thinking and planning? That there's so many demands on people's time getting through the next quarter or the next board meeting. How do you carve out the time to consistently be looking ahead and peering around corners?
What's your number 1 piece of advice for somebody entering the professional world today as a leader, an emerging leader?
My advice is that the first part of your career is going to be about learning what you're good at and learning what you like. And there's no better way to do that than to find a really good boss. But don't get locked in on a specific industry, specific company, specific role. There's going to be so many things that change about you over the next 10 plus years. Plus, society and technology is going to be changing. Jobs are going to be created. Just be focused on learning and experimenting for the first part of your career.
What is the number 1 quality a bad boss has?
A bad boss approaches conversations always thinking they have the right answer and are not open to listening to what the other person's saying.
So what if there is a boss there that is somewhat self-aware and they're getting feedback, constant 360 feedback that is just not good, and they're feeling like they're in disarray? They don't know, how do I get better at this? What advice would you give? And I'm just going to call it what it is, to a bad boss.
If they are legitimately interested in it, then it starts with, okay, we've got a meeting coming up. Prepare for how I'm going to show up in that meeting. How am I going to speak last? Am I going to come in with a bunch of answers and just tell people what to do? Or am I going to come in and ask questions? So preparing to show up in a different way with a real intention to change behavior will go a long way towards helping. But Chris, Rome is not built in a day. If we're building new muscles, we're going to need to practice, and we're going to need to take some reps in order to ultimately get there. And people shouldn't be overly harsh the first time out of the box if it's not quite perfect, because it's not going to be. It takes some reps and takes some practice. But again, with the real intention, we'll get there.
Mike, what do you say to clients that they tell you, okay, here's my clock is just, my agenda is just packed. I don't have time for that. That makes me want to pull my hair out. How does it make you feel?
It's same. And I think it just becomes a natural question of, what are your priorities? Do you have a desire to change? And if you do, then let's look at what you're saying yes to currently and what you would like to swap out some of those yeses for versus some of these alternative things that we want to spend time on. Because, when you're a leader, leading people isn't part of the job. It is the job. And people don't naturally think of it that way. And you go back to, the best athletes, Tiger Woods, Tom Brady, Serena Williams, you name it, that they view training and practice and their performance as totally linked with one another. And for leaders to think that I don't have time to train, I don't have time to practice, that really my job, I've got too many demands and I've just got to go, plow ahead. I think they're losing sight of the benefit of doing reflection, thinking about a game plan, and the impact that's going to have also in terms of efficiency and just better results. So again, it's going to require some sacrifice. There's going to be things currently that they're saying yes to that we're going to have to say, no, not yet, or even better if delegate.
All right, Mike, this has been fantastic. Thank you. This has been wonderful.
Well, I really, really appreciated this, Chris. Super, super fun. And, just I hope people get something out of it. And it was just a thrill talking to you and great stuff.
And we thank Mike very much for being on the show. Several takeaways from this conversation, but let's get right to the heart of them. Mike said, don't run towards great companies, run towards great bosses. How often does this come up on the podcast? You can have a high-performing company, but when you look under the hood, per se, right? What is the culture? Are they performing despite dysfunction? Are they performing despite bad leadership, right? That's your job, to do your very best to see what is going on here, asking the right questions, being curious, and vetting the company and its people as best you can. And then when you're in the company, is this matching my values and where we're going together? Learn, grow, make mistakes, but understand that you have to do it together. And that is what a great boss will allow to happen. All right, Mike also said, what are you good at? If you are sensing that you want to do something else, like Mike, have a conversation and say, what are the possibilities either in this company or outside, and make progress every day towards that goal. And finally, the importance of preparation. If you're going to have a side hustle or change jobs, be prepared. Do the best you can to find out what the reality of that day-to-day will be. And of course, if you do it like Mike did, look what happens. It changed the course and nature of his life for the better. We thank Mike very much for being on the show. And I thank you each and every week. Like the podcast, put a comment down, recommend it. We appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.